So, welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. You know, when you think about your marketing options with TV, layering in addressable targeting should be an option you're considering. But on top of just that targeting, you've got to consider what types of partners can help your campaigns be successful. As the Chief Operating Officer for One to One Media, the only full scale national addressable platform in the market today, Jamie Power brings a tremendous amount of knowledge in the advanced TV space. She's delivered thousands of campaigns. And on this episode, we'll talk a little bit about how the market continues to evolve, some of the challenges, and some of the best practices for achieving successful campaigns, as well as how to help move the industry forward. So let's stay tuned to Mr. Shark and a TV expert on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right, so Jamie, thank you for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about your experience and your career up to your position today at One to One Media.
All right. Thank you for having me. For the last 5 years, I have done nothing but execute audience based television buying. So I think there's a lot of talk in the marketplace about it, but I've been in the unique position to actually get to execute. The other day, I actually counted up how many campaigns I've executed in the last 5 years, and it was over 3,000. And then looking at all the data we've stored from that, I mean, basically what I did for the last 5 years is I just stored every piece of data and then knew that I would figure out a way to use it. So we have about 8 billion impressions of historical data that we now leverage in our platform to create some predictive analytics for clients.
3,000, that's amazing. So describe, if you will, kind of the addressable and advanced TV space, the ecosystem, just at a high level where you see it today.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about addressable television not having scale or all the different barriers. Like we actually think the reverse. So right now,
Couldn't agree more.
the scale of addressable television is about 63.5 million households, and that sits across 8 MVPDs. An MVPD is a cable or satellite provider. Of that 63.5 million, 53% of the inventory is linear addressable, and the remaining is VOD addressable. We actually expand beyond the traditional like television screens. So I would say like our approach is, kind of screen agnostic. We identify the objective of the campaign. We have from our historical data the most responsive first and third party data sets that will work, and then we basically find the audiences across different screens using the same targeting. So I don't care if it's a linear stream, a VOD stream, if it's tablet, mobile, or OTT. The most important thing is to have a unified target and then be able to connect all the attribution and give the client cross-channel attribution post-campaign.
So let's talk a little bit about data then, since you brought that up. What's the value of leveraging data to for advanced TV and audience targeting? How does that sort of improve the return for marketers?
So I think that what we really need to do is listen to the data and also kind of bring in a new skill set to the marketplace to understand what the data is saying. So we're using data in addressable television to use targeting that goes way below demography, and that basically allows us to use television as a vehicle that not only drives awareness with broad demo buying linear television, but we also can now drive consumers lower down the funnel and target prospects that are most likely to drive a conversion. We use data in two ways. So the first, like I said, is targeting, and then the second and most important is the post-campaign kind of analytics and attribution that we get. I think the biggest challenge today in the marketplace is that everybody is talking about data, but I don't think that there's a real understanding of how to use the data properly and to really pull insights out and optimize future campaigns, because it's kind of a new skill set, it's a new currency. And when you give a traditional buyer, a report from Experian or Axiom or Polk or, Nielsen Catalina, and you give them a metric like a buy rate or a sales rate, I think that everyone says, I want the data, I want the data, then they get it and they don't know what to do with it yet.
Yeah, data is one of those buzzwords that has just sort of caught on too much in a way that people really throw it out there like it's a consulting term, but don't really understand how to get the insights. So let's talk a little bit about the quality of data itself driving the value. There's a ton of companies out there that are selling data left and right. Talk about the value of higher quality data. And I ask this because a lot of customers have their own first party data, but maybe a lot isn't necessarily a lot when you consider match rates from a first party data set to an MVPD or a TV. If you're looking at third party data sources to supplement, then how does the quality of that data matter and how can it affect your targeting?
Yeah, I mean, the first question before we even get to like what data we're going to use is like kind of taking a step back with the client and asking them like what do you want to do from the what do you want to do, or what's the objective of the campaign, and from there we can identify the most responsive data. You know, like I said before, because I don't get out much and have executed so many campaigns in the last 5 years, there's like tons of data that we can pull from that gives us like a look back historically. For example, like if it's a CPG campaign, the way that I plan a CPG campaign, if the campaign's goal is to drive incremental customers versus to get increased frequency of their existing customers, like the reach frequency is different, and actually the data that I would recommend is different. A lot of times the match rates for addressable television are actually pretty high because you're matching against the subscriber file. So, I mean, we generally don't have problems with match files. When people get into like what's good data, what's bad data, I don't think that there's a uniform answer. I mean, good data is any data that works to drive a client's business result. Like that's what good data is. If it's doing something, if it's driving product, if it's getting people into stores, if it's increasing web traffic, like then it's good data for that client. I think that clients need to get out into the marketplace and start to test what works for them. If everyone takes like a passive approach and saying, I don't think it's good data, or this data might not work, like if they get in and try it, you're smarter at the end of every single advanced television campaign. So you're able to optimize and move forward.
That's a great quote. So, research says that something like about 15 to 20% ish of advertisers use addressable or advanced TV buys, while another 20 to 30 are, sort of sitting on the fence and at least planning to start testing. I mean, you talk to all the big advertisers nationally. Why do you think some are still apprehensive today? Is it a lack of knowledge about the space? Maybe they don't have enough knowledge about data. Is it targeting? Is automation? Is it measurement? What is it that holds somebody back? Because to your point, you always get smarter.
Yeah, I mean, you always get smarter. I mean, the answer to your question initially is all of the above. I think that the biggest challenge is a lot of times the word test. Like you're not testing anything with addressable. Like right now, because the scale is more than half of the U.S. Like there's a big opportunity, and if you're testing with one MVPD and you identify a segment, you might reach 800,000 qualified households and have a return on ad spend around $300,000. But if you scale that across all addressable supply, all of a sudden you're reaching millions of qualified households and you're driving a return on ad spend that is plus two, three, four, $5 million, depending on the category. I think that also, because there are no standards, it makes it a little bit challenging to execute. So there are 8 MVPDs. There are about 30 different technologies that enable addressability across the different providers. There's hundreds of different data partners, and every single system operates differently. They all have different tech stacks. They all want to integrate the data differently. So what happens is if a traditional buyer tries to buy addressable, not only is it challenging because everyone does stuff differently, but all of a sudden it's a different currency. It's impression based versus GRP based. So I think it's like none of this stuff is hard, but we're not making it any easier by not having anything uniform. So I think that once we start to deploy some sort of like technology, I actually think our platform does a good job at um, unifying it and making it easier to execute by being able to pull counts in real time and making sure that they're uniform across all the providers, and aggregating the reporting, making sure that you're getting like media delivery and the advanced analytics in a uniform way that you're able to pull insights out. Because right now it's like people don't have like the bandwidth or even understanding to make sure that what they're getting is something that is additive. It just feels like a bunch of like different campaigns that you're doing with different providers, and then the results that you get back, if it's not unified, you'll get back different metrics from every single MVPD. Um, so it doesn't work unless someone kind of helps put it together and make it easier to buy.
So TV is generally considered very effective for branding and brand positioning, and if it's more effective to the most effective for building awareness, then this is a little bit of a two-parter. Why wouldn't people target? And I'm trying to play some devil's advocate and ask, when does it make sense to do a general linear TV buy as opposed to an addressably targeted one?
So we never talk about, or I've never sold addressable television as a replacement to national linear television. Even when the entire world is enabled with addressable technology, I don't think that everything will go addressable. I think that there's different roles for television and how we use it based on the marketing funnel and getting people down. So if everything was addressable and you only spoke to people when they were ready to convert, like if you only spoke to me when I could afford a certain car or a watch, like the brand equity wouldn't have been built over the years. So addressable really is a means to increase frequency at high value households, lower down the funnel. So it's not an and or, it's a you need to do both in order to properly speak to the consumer.
Couldn't agree more. So let's talk about some of the best practices in executing an addressable TV campaign, and kind of paint with broad strokes as an example. Let's say a client comes in to talk. Walk us through at a high level. How does a company think about planning, timing, targeting, campaign on airtime, and measurement?
Okay. So basically, there's kind of like a checklist that we go through. The first thing that we want to look at is the incident size. So the incident size, meaning after we identify the target that we want to reach, the incident size would be the percentage that fit that targeting criteria. Generally, if the target falls within 5% to 35%, we would say that that's like the sweet spot from an economic standpoint to execute addressable. When you start to get below 5% of households, then generally the target is too small and the results on the back end would not be stat sig. So if I can't action on the results, it really doesn't make sense to execute that way. On the flip side, when you start to get really broad, 30, 35%, like if an advertiser says like I want to reach anyone that buys toothpaste, you would say, well, it's more efficient to buy nationally because you have a broad target. But if you were able to flip the target and say if you only want to conquest against competitive brands, then it would make sense to execute addressably. The next thing that we do is we do an effective CPM analysis. So after you identify the incident size, then you look at what the brand would pay nationally, and then you strip out all the waste. So if a brand is, spending, if the CPM nationally is $25 and you strip out all the waste, that CPM is actually going to look a lot higher. And then you want to make sure that the addressable CPM, makes it more efficient way to reach that audience.
So, what are the best KPIs for an agency or an advertiser to set for measurement? You can measure a lot with addressable TV, but so that someone doesn't set the expectation bar too low or too high, what are you seeing as some of the best ways that a client can measure an addressable TV campaign?
So, like I said before, it's making sure that you're aligned with the client of what success is. You want to make sure that the KPI is clear and that the measurement is clearly laying that out. Like, I don't want to walk into a room, present results, and a client say, like, I don't care about that metric or that metric isn't important to me. I want to walk in knowing, if the campaign succeeded or if it didn't succeed. I want to know exactly what was broken so I could make recommendations to fix it moving forward. We can measure anything from web traffic, foot traffic, households that were exposed, social chatter. So there's many different ways that we can measure it. But what I will say is we like to layer the measurement so we're getting more information to the client as it goes. So if you take a category like auto, auto has a really long attribution window. So you sell in a client with a, and you get them excited about addressable, and then you want them to be able to start seeing the learnings post campaign. So generally, when I execute an auto campaign, we'll do different layers of attribution. We'll be able to first show them that households were exposed. We saw an increase in web traffic. So getting them again, like lower down the funnel, they're researching the car. We then will do a foot traffic measure. And then because the attribution window is so long, it'll take me 3 months to tie it back to a sale. But the client's able to leverage learnings along the way and are excited about what they're learning.
So, what are you seeing the smartest advertisers doing with campaigns, and what are you seeing the not so smart ones doing that end up not being successful campaigns?
So I think that the smartest clients, are kind of letting the data speak for itself. When clients sometimes are leveraging their first party data, even though it wouldn't be a classical addressable segment, if you use the first party data to see which the most responsive households are, that works really well. Some of the executions that I've worked on that didn't work well was when the message and the target weren't aligned. Like, did a campaign with a QSR that, used their first party loyalty data as the target, but then the product we were pushing was a very niche product that didn't they knew wasn't going to resonate with their entire first party list. So you just making sure that the target and the message is aligned. If you're going to spend the money and spend the time to execute addressably, just making sure that the message makes sense really helps.
Yeah, and to your point, the fact that you can actually learn something from it that when it's unsuccessful, you couldn't necessarily do with a normal TV buy. So, there is always at least a small win out of it in the fact that you can learn something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the last 50 years, it's been like TV on, I'm selling product, TV off, I'm selling less product, and everyone kind of high five. With addressable television, we obviously have transparency and we see what worked and what didn't work. Everyone gets hung up on, did it work? What's the positive ROI? What's the positive ROI? But I actually think it's just as powerful to know what's broken to be able to fix it, because we've never had that level of transparency in television before. So it just makes us so much smarter at the end of the campaign. So I don't want to get hung up on it always having to be a positive ROI the first time. But I do make sure that when I talk to clients, I do let them know that they'll be smarter with their television buy no matter what at the end of the campaign.
Describe how different one to one is. And this will sound like a shameless plug, but I've learned from working with experts as opposed to not. An agency like one to one from typical agencies who don't play in this space. I mean, we've talked before about you asked tough questions, but they were always knowledgeable, pushing it forward for an advertiser, for a client. And I've worked with large, very high level name agencies that people have heard of in the New York advertising space who didn't have a clue about addressable TV. So it's a different game. And talk about the value that, and I know it sounds like a shameless plug, and it is, but talk about the value that a company like One to One brings that others don't, who don't have knowledge in this space.
Perfect. Yeah. One to one actually isn't an agency. We are a national addressable platform. To your point about other agencies not having the bandwidth or the understanding of how addressable works, that's just because it is different. None of this stuff is hard. It's just we have focused 100% on addressable television, where a lot of people have been talking about it in the space. Like, this is literally all I've done. I mean, in the beginning, I would sit up in my apartment till 4 o'clock in the morning, like aggregating media delivery. So every aspect of it, everyone on the one-to-one team knows how to do it. And also, to the point that I mentioned earlier, of that I just like basically hoarded all of the data, like I saved all of the data. Every single data point I could get from every campaign over the years has been saved. And now, coming to a technology company and working with data science teams, it allows us to action on that data like I never have before. So where everything used to be basically Excel sheet after Excel sheet and a totally manual process, now adding technology in a smart way has helped us sort of push the business forward. Like, anytime we executed a campaign to find the optimal reach frequency across category of the objective, basically we would pull a pivot table and be manually pulling that. And for me to basically see like all of our brains dumped into data science and work with people that they can make the data more actionable for us is a home run. So I think that using technology in the right way and starting from understanding television, how television works, gives us like a thoughtful platform that can help other agencies accelerate the growth and realize the full potential of addressable.
So you just eliminated my work-life balance question. So, considering I was the same way about working until 3 a.m. Central. So wave your magic wand and tell us what you would like to see in the market right now. I mean, what kind of advancements are there that would help make addressable and advanced TV more of a norm? Is it speed, automation, pricing, people's knowledge in the space, better attribution and measurement? What kind of thing, if you could wave your magic wand today, having the experience you have, what would you change?
Um, so again, you make it very easy because the answer is generally all of the above. I mean, to accelerate the growth of addressable, we need standards created in the marketplace. We need to truly embrace automation and start getting smarter about how we plan. The other thing that's happening as you see, the networks come in and out and different parties offering addressability is pricing. And I think that some of the addressable suppliers now are pricing addressable television too high. And what we'll see a big year of getting clients in because I feel like this is the inflection point that everyone's ready to test it and get in the market. But if it's priced too high among the supply, then we're going to see a ton of you know negative return on ad spend, and then the promise of addressable will quickly go away. But I think that if we work together for, standards, automation, and sort of like embracing a new way of thinking, it will work. I think that the agencies probably need to bring in people with a different skill set that understand kind of like data science and analytics. I think that we need to sort of we're bringing all this new data and all these new metrics into television, and I don't think that people quite know what to do with it yet. So I think that we just need to kind of educate and kind of level set like what this is and the type of buying and what this can do for a brand.
So, how do people find out more about one to one and get in touch with your team?
Yeah, to get more information on one to one and our national addressable platform, you can go to one-to-one-media.tv. So feel free to reach out. We're happy to help. I think there's a limited amount of people in the marketplace that understand and truly understand advanced television and what's possible. I think the biggest mistake that we can make is by acting like we're all competitive, because if we all work together, I think we can truly drive the marketplace forward. And I think there's room for the limited amount of expertise that exists now to lift the entire industry up.
Okay, so thank you, Jamie, for being on the show. I really appreciate your time today, and looking forward to stay tuned on good things to come in the addressable advanced TV space.
Thanks for having me.
So there was my conversation with Jamie Power, a real expert in addressable and advanced TV. And let's take a look at 3 key insights and takeaways from that conversation. First, and I quote, "You're smarter at the very end of every single advanced television campaign, so you're able to optimize and move forward." Second, addressable television is not a replacement to national linear television. There are different roles for different types of television spend depending upon your funnel, and there's a place for each in order to speak to the consumer in the right way depending on where they are in the journey. Third, and again I quote, "There are a limited amount of people in the marketplace who truly understand addressable TV and what's possible." So if you're considering an addressable or advanced TV campaign, whether you're an agency or advertiser, a big mistake can be not partnering with the right kind of expert who doesn't truly understand that space, especially when you consider the kind of money being spent on those campaigns. Got a question? Feel free to send me an email to Kenneth at asharksperspective.com. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.